Hey guys! Welcome to the weekly What Sold video. I have had a week. I want to talk about what sold in my online stores this week. I am a newer reseller. I've only been doing this for a couple of months and I do it part-time. I cross-list all my listings to Poshmark, eBay, Mercari, and Depop. And I had some really interesting sales this week. One of the big things that happened this week is I had my first international sale was on eBay. It actually happened a lot sooner than I thought it would. Originally, eBay had reached out to me with an email saying, hey, you've been approved for international sales. In the email, it kind of goes into what that means. The long and the short of it is that eBay handles all the really fiddly stuff like tariffs and customs and all that. They said, hey, it's seamless. We will take care of the international weird portion for you if it happens. And I did have my first sale. We can talk about that. And I'll talk about what I had to do on the seller end of things because of that, if it was just as easy as eBay said it was. As we go along, I will talk about all the sales for the week, talk about each sale, what platform it sold on, how much it went for, and how long it took for me to sell once I listed, and anything else interesting about the sale. And at the end of the video, I will share how much I made for the whole week. And as part of that, I will share my gross sales, what the buyers paid for the items, as well as my net sales, my cost of goods, and my net profits. So you'll get an idea of basically what a person who's new to this and as a part-time reseller could make on a regular week. And actually this was a slow week for me as a spoiler, but there's some interesting sales in here and I noticed some interesting patterns I want to get into at the end too when I'm doing the numbers. So definitely something you want to check out. I'm a nerd. I love math. I love spreadsheets. So my weeks for the store when I'm doing the weekly What Sold run from Monday through Sunday. So my very first sale last week was on Monday, and that was on Poshmark. This was an interesting sale to me. It was this new with tags J. Crew vintage cotton tank top in a size extra small. And this is something I found at the bins. It was extremely lightweight. Now, it's the middle of winter. And extra small is a really small size. You know, you'll hear the advice, hey, make sure you pick up substantial pieces. A little tiny tank top is about as insubstantial as you can get. But I was like, okay, well the size isn't great. It's kind of an insubstantial piece, but it is J. Crew and it is new with tags and it is vintage cotton. So cotton being a natural material, there's a little bit of a halo effect for some of the natural materials. So I was like, okay, we will give this a shot. And I sold it for $16 and it took me 40 days to sell, which frankly in the dead of winter, not too bad, especially in that niche size. It was a very clean sale and I got a 5-star review from the buyer, so very happy about that. But that was all I sold on Monday. On Tuesday, I had a couple of sales. One was a pretty good sale. This was on Poshmark. It was a pair of Lucky Brand jeans, men's, 221 original straight, in a size 34-32. I was pretty pleased about that. So far I've had some success selling Lucky Brand men's denim, but it has been all on eBay up to this point. This is the first time I've sold a pair on Poshmark. So I was pretty pleased about that. I was also pleased that they sold for $35 and it only took 10 days to sell. So that was a good meaty sale. $35 for a pair of men's jeans. Feeling good about that. Also on Tuesday, I had a smaller sale, but it was on Mercari. And as you guys know, Mercari has been the platform I have been struggling the most to find my footing on. So I talked about this a little bit in one of the earlier videos, but the way Mercari works when you're new to it is that until you get your first sale and the item goes to the buyer and the buyer gets it and they rate you, Mercari limits you to 100 listings. And I was in a situation where, you know, I had 400 listings. So I was having to kind of pick and choose which ones I put on Mercari because I was limited. And Mercari hasn't confirmed this at all. I haven't seen this anywhere, but I really feel like when I was locked down to 100 listings and then later 200 listings and then 300, that not only was I limited with the number of listings I could do, I feel like Mercari wasn't giving my listings as many impressions, so it was a lot more difficult to sell on Mercari in the beginning. But I will say in general, Mercari tends to be a little bit more price sensitive, and I'm noticing certain categories sell there and certain categories don't. So Mercari is this moody creature I'm still getting the hang of. And this was another low value sale, but I was still pretty happy to sell it. And that was a new with tags Gap Cottage Core floral midi dress in a size small. So this was another bins find. It didn't cost me very much at all. It's actually quite lightweight. I had a lot of drama with this dress actually. I've had it up for a while. I've had it up on all the platforms. And I've had people ask questions about it, have it go nowhere. Somebody on Depop asked me about this dress and they wanted a picture of me in it. Now, I am not a small woman. I can't wear a small size dress. I've talked about before, I'm probably like a 1X, 2X. I'm a plus size lady. This was just something I had found in the bins. So I basically told the buyer, hey, I can't wear it. It was thrifted, but here's the stock photo. I managed to find the stock photo and I put it at the end of the Depop listing for her so she could look at it. And in the middle of our conversation, the item got relisted. My bot. It had been long enough that it had been up that my cross-listing software deleted it and relisted it, so the listing vanished. So she was like, wait a second, where did it go? And I'm like, oh, it's up, it's been relisted. I kind of directed her towards the new listing. I didn't hear from her, so she might have thought I was a scammer or a weird person. Or, you know, she changed her mind for other reasons, or she found something else she wanted to buy. But anyway, that was some drama, and I had a lot of people asking questions like, does it have pockets, blah, blah, blah. You know, you get a lot of questions as a reseller, but I had a lot of like casual interest, but nobody had bid. So I ended up selling it after, I think it was on the market for a couple of months, but it had been up on Mercari for 44 days. And I sold it for $11, which not a great price. The retail is kind of low on it. The retail on it is only $45. So the tag is on it, has a price. And yes, it's cottage core, but it is also kind of a mall brand. Gap isn't exactly hot. I do think if it had been a large or an extra large, I could have easily gotten 20 or 25 for it. But with all the other things and with how long it had been sitting and how much drama there had been with the other one, I was like, okay, sure, 11, I'll take it, fine, whatever. Let's go to the post office anyway. You hear that a lot from me. So not the best sale in the world, but considering I probably spent maybe $1 for it at the bins, I'm okay with it. Especially because it was a Mercari sale and I've been trying to get my Mercari sales up, so. All right, so that was Tuesday. On Wednesday, I had a single sale. I sold my Philosophy forest green sweater with black polka dots. That's a size medium, this sweater. And this was something I picked up on, I want to say my very first bins haul. You guys can tell me if you remember, I did it on this channel. It was in one of my hauls that I did for you guys. But yeah, this sweater is actually quite cute and kind of chic, but Philosophy isn't really like a high value brand. It tends to do better with plus size, at least I've heard. So I was pretty pleased to finally sell it. Size medium is like a tough size sometimes to sell. Now, this is something I got at the bins. It took a couple months to sell. My bins price is $1.59 a pound. And I would say this sweater cost me about $1. I sold it for $13. So I was like, okay, we can do that, especially because it had been a while. Hadn't gotten much interest on it at all. It was something that later I was like, should I have bought that? So it's actually really nice. It was in my first bin. So I have storage totes with my inventory in it, and this was from the very first one I did. So it was literally one of the very first things I bought. So I was glad to move that. And then on Thursday, I had one sale, but it was a very exciting sale. This was my first international sale, and this was on eBay. It was actually a plus size sweater. It was this really cute Maurice's gray V-neck sweater. It had these little side button details on it, and it was in a size 1X. Now that took 39 days to sell on eBay, and the buyer paid $22.39 for it, and it went to Canada. Oh, Canada. So how did that work? So I am here in the Pacific Northwest. That's where I sell from. So when I got the sale, I went to the interface to get the shipping label like always. And I did the normal eBay shuffle you do where you measure it to make sure that you have enough postage. And so I put it on the scale, made sure it weighed the right amount and measured it. And I purchased the shipping label from eBay and it printed out the label. And the neat thing is that eBay needed certain things to be on the shipping label. And they actually explained that there was like a buyer number that they needed to connect it to the right international sale case. Since I went to the eBay app and I did the shipping label like I do on my other orders, they had told me, hey, it's going to be on there. I did check and it was on there because I went and I purchased the shipping through eBay. Now, if you do it a different way, if you purchase the shipping another way, that buyer identification might not be on there, and in that case, you need to make sure it's on there. So where did I send it, right? Where I ended up sending it was a distribution center for eBay. And it was in Illinois somewhere. I think it was like in Chicagoland. So out in the Midwest somewhere. And they're going to take care of whatever they do with customs and tariffs or whatever they need to do. That's not my department. But for me, I just packed it, you know, how I normally pack things. I put my tissue paper and my thank you sticker and my poly mailer, and I just sent it right out. And yeah, the rest is history. Apparently, according to their documentation, if Godzilla forbid there's a return or any nonsense, shenanigans, they will also take care of that. They will help facilitate that. So yeah, it was just like any other sale. The only thing that you would run into is if you were doing your own shipping labels, if you weren't purchasing it through eBay. I think there's some third parties where you can purchase shipping through, and then you can do that. And I think some people do that because they like the way that is, or they get discounts or what have you. But I pretty much just do it right through eBay, and so it was the same. So that was pretty exciting. All right, and then on the next day, which was Friday, I had two sales again, and they were both actually pretty exciting to me, but for different reasons. So the first was this Victoria's Sport, that's a Victoria's Secret line, underwire sports bra, size 38DD, in this crazy retro flower power print. This thing is so freaking cute. I fell in love with it the minute that I took it out of the bins. Like, I love this thing. So my bins price being $1.59 a pound, this being a sports bra, didn't cost me very much at all. I sold it to a buyer for $20. I think I had it listed for $25 and she offered $20, which I thought was very reasonable. And I took the offer. I really love this bra. I was really hoping it would find a good home. I've been in love with it. If it fit me, if that were my size, I would have kept it. But happy to find it a new home. That took 41 days to sell. Also later that day was another really interesting sale. And this is actually quite international of a sale for me, even though it wasn't, you know, selling to an international buyer. This is the other big international highlight of the week, so to speak. This is by far the strangest thing that I have sold on the store to date. So, not the strangest thing I have listed. I actually have a pair of genuine leather lederhosen that's up right now that's quite pricey, and honestly probably the most unusual thing I have, but I digress. Let's talk about what I actually sold. So my other Friday sale was this vintage Brigade Quartermaster's Woolly Poly sweater. This thing was made in England. It's a size 44. Now this is interesting. When I pulled this thing out of the bins, I knew it was different. It was heavy and weird. Like, it had like the scratchy wool, and then it had the canvas patches on it. Like, it just looked different than other things. And I was like, this is very odd. I'm going to pull this aside and I'm going to look it up. Especially because it had made in England on it. So looked it up, and it's apparently vintage British military gear, and it's something that people seek out. So I was like, huh, that's very interesting. At first I was really excited because it was looking like something that I could sell for 50-ish, but I realized when I got it home that there was one small moth hole in the thing, which makes sense, right? Vintage wool. I ended up putting the sweater in the freezer and isolating it and everything to make sure that I killed any moths that were in it, because I don't want to infest the buyer's home, I don't want to infest my home, destroy inventory. You know, a lot of sellers will do this with every piece of wool. This especially I wanted to be careful with, especially because there was a moth hole. Anyway, I listed it, sold on eBay. Originally, I was gonna price it at $50, but because of the hole, I ended up pricing it for $34.99, which I was really pleased with because it only cost me a few dollars, being that it was from the bins. And a buyer on eBay purchased it for full price after 22 days of it being on the market. So I was very pleased about that. And the final sale of the week was on Saturday. I actually didn't have any sales on Sunday this week, which was highly unusual. And I'm going to talk about why I think that is after I talk about my last sale. But the final sale of the week was on Saturday. And it was a Ralph Lauren wool blend lined pencil skirt size 14 in a gray tweed. Now, this thing was really, really cute. I was a little surprised it sold so fast because we are at the end of January. I mean, on one hand, dead of winter, right? So yeah, a wool skirt, very seasonal. The other hand, we are kind of trending into spring and people have their winter wardrobe. I was really surprised that my last two sales of the week were wool items because of that, because I don't know, I'm new to this, but I know personally I tend to buy my winter items in November or October or whenever I start feeling cold for the first time, but not complaining. I think this did really well because Ralph Lauren is a good designer. Usually the menswear is a little better than women's wear, but this is like a nice piece, the wool blend. And the size 14, I think it was doing a lot of work here. Size 14 is a very common, great size. So I think that worked out really well for me. And the buyer paid $31, which I was thrilled with. But even more so, this was a next day sale. I had listed it on Friday and it sold on Saturday, so one day to sell. So real banger. And then no sales on Sunday, which again, very, very strange. That's usually my biggest sale day of the week. I'm thinking it had a lot to do with all the winter weather that was going on. You know, there was kind of like a snow apocalypse situation. Lots of places had snow and ice and sleet that didn't normally have it, so people are focused on buying things to prep for that. They're also maybe not ordering stuff because they know the mail is going to be messed up for a while. I don't know. It was slow and that's fine. I just started doing the weekly ones last week, so I only had the 8 sales this week. Last week I had 20 sales, so definitely a sharp drop in the number of sales, although I do have some silver lining as I go into the numbers here. Very excited about. But you're gonna have some weeks that are like that. I've heard about this from everybody. There's some weeks you're gonna sell a lot and some weeks you're gonna sell a little bit less, and that's okay. I was really happy to have the sales that I did. They were all really interesting sales, frankly. Let's talk about the numbers. The gross sales for last week, which is the total that the buyers paid for the items. The gross sales were $183.38. Now that's not what I get paid by the platform. Anybody who's done this for a while knows. So let's talk about net sales. This is what the platform paid me after the platform fees, any shipping discounts I gave. And the platform fees are different for each platform. Roughly, Poshmark is 20%, eBay is roughly 13%, Mercari is 10%, Depop is 5%. And then shipping discounts, so if I give free shipping or I discount the shipping partly, or if I screw up on the shipping label for eBay and I eat the cost, that also comes out of the kitty to get net sales. My net sales for the week were $146.20. And if we're going to calculate my profit, we have to look at the cost of goods. The cost of goods is what I spent for what I sold. I only spent $15 total for all these items together. That means that my net profit last week was $131.20. Definitely not as much as I made the week before, which was $233 and change. But I'm still feeling pretty good about that as a part-time reseller. And frankly, I love when I have busy sale weeks. I had a lot of them, but with 8 sales, I was less busy packing and shipping too. So I ended up doing a little bit less work as well. And here's something interesting. When you're looking at what you're selling with your store, a lot of times sellers will talk about ASP, which is average sale price. So what is the average sale on your store? So last week, when I had sold 20 items, my average sale price was $19 per item. That was the average, what I was selling. This week, my average sale price was $23 per item. So on average, they were more valuable, more profitable sales, even though there were fewer of them and even though the grand total was lower. So in some ways that means that, you know, it was more worth my while even if I took home less. And I still have tons of inventory to sell, so don't worry about that. And if you're looking at my return on investment, my profit on the inventory, like how much more did I get for each item. My profit on the actual inventory was 8.7 times what I paid for it, versus last week where I only received 3.6 times what I paid for it. So I did a lot better item per item this week, even though I sold fewer things. So that seems strange. Why is there the big discrepancy? Well, this week's inventory only cost me $15 to source. Last week's sale bunch, I spent $65 to source. And the reason for that is that this week was all bins. These were all things that I bought for $1.59 a pound at the Goodwill bins, the clearance outlet. Last week I had some finds that were mixed in that I had gotten at estate sales, things I had paid up for, as well as things I had bought from thrift stores to flip, including some stuff that I bought from like my very first video on this channel where I didn't really have good margins on things. I did sell it and I did make a little bit of money, but it wasn't a lot. So that's something to consider, right? There's all these different ways that a week can be a good week, a bad week, a slow week, a fast week. I just try to focus on learning whatever I can about the last batch of sales and using that to guide my sourcing and my decisions moving forward. I think that's all anybody can do, but yeah, another week on the books. I tell you guys, it has been a crazy day. Apologize if I'm loopy at all. Some of you might notice I got a little bit of dye on my forehead here. If you see like my part, I actually just went and got my hair done. It's a big self-care thing for me. I didn't really have a lot of time or desire to go get it done, but you know how it is. You gotta get it done every now and then. Gotta make time for that self-care. I've been a little under the weather. I haven't been feeling well. I actually have a sty in one of my eyes. So I've been kind of trying to take care of myself. As I'm filming this, I have a lot of offers out. Everything ticked up again. I'm hoping I get a bunch of sales because I've been flooded with interest and questions this morning. I wonder if it's pent-up demand from the weekend. We shall see. That would be lovely if I had another big week this week. If not, it's okay. Everything evens out over the long run. I think it's important to protect your mood when you're doing something like this and not let yourself get on too much of a roller coaster, because you really want to play the long game. That's where you make the most money, is by taking the long view, learning what you can, and making sure that you protect your mood. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.